Along the banks of the Druzet River in the French Alps, scientists recently unearthed fragments of subfossil Scots pine trees. The tight, well-preserved grain of these remnants holds an environmental ledger dating back to the end of the last ice age. This chart tracks historical background levels of the isotope carbon-14. Notice the steady baseline over millennia until the line suddenly shoots upward, revealing a 40 per million radiocarbon spike precisely in the year 12,350 BC. This kind of sudden isotopic surge is known as a Miyake event. For years, dating a surge like this during an ice age was nearly impossible. The standard climate box models researchers relied on simply couldn't process atmospheric data under such extreme glacial conditions. To decode the spike, researchers from the University of Oulu utilized a 3D chemistry climate model called SOCAL14CX. By running the ancient tree ring data through this framework, they confirmed the anomaly was an extreme solar particle event. This single data point from the French Alps sets a new, higher boundary for the maximum intensity of solar particle storms recorded in Earth's history. To put the scale of the 12,350 BC storm into perspective, we have to look at the largest solar particle event of the modern satellite era, which occurred in January 2005. The ancient storm was over 500 times more intense. This diagram illustrates the radiation threat using a Modring-Apolden flight. During the 2005 storm, a passenger would receive a full year's worth of sea-level cosmic radiation in 1 hour. During the extreme 12,350 BC event, that identical dose was delivered in just 8 seconds. Corroborating data from beryllium-10 found in Greenland ice cores shows this event was global, hitting both the atmosphere and the poles simultaneously. Until this discovery, our understanding of extreme space weather was limited to the Holocene epoch, the past 12,000 years of relatively stable, warm climate. This event establishes a new baseline for the scale of cosmic energy Earth can realistically expect to encounter. As that high flux of relativistic protons slammed into Earth, the planet's magnetic field was warped and saturated. The result was massive auroras burning across the sky, visible far across the globe in broad daylight. Hundreds of thousands of prehistoric hunter-gatherers living in Europe at the time would have looked up to see the atmosphere glowing with no context for the cosmic mechanics occurring above them. To understand how they processed this, we can look at the neuropsychological model of rock art. This theory outlines how intense, overwhelming visual stimuli cause the human brain to perceive entoptic phenomena, geometric light patterns generated directly by the optic nerve. Under severe stress or altered states of consciousness, these blazing optical phenomena were interpreted through the spiritual frameworks of the time, likely becoming central to shamanic belief systems. We see physical evidence of deep cultural engagement in places like El Castillo Cave in Spain. Forensic analysis of the digital ratios on these hand stencils proves that both men and women actively participated in the rituals of this era, leaving their literal marks on the stone. The presence of these hand stencils alongside entoptic-like patterns suggests that ancient people didn't just witness the sky, they made a concerted effort to document and incorporate the experience into their physical world. Down on the ground in the Levant, human societies were already highly complex. The Natufian culture lived in semi-subterranean stone villages and actively traded jewelry across vast distances. The solar storm of 12,350 BC struck right as these communities were dealing with a separate, devastating era of climatic volatility. A period known as the Younger Dryas was plunging the northern hemisphere into near-glacial cold. The once lush landscape of the Middle East was overtaken by severe, relentless drought. For the Natufians, this was a period of extreme environmental stress. The wild staple plants and grains they had harvested for generations began to vanish from the landscape. Communities at settlements like Abu Huraira shifted their strategy during this time. They moved away from gathering wild food and began the systematic, deliberate cultivation of specific, resilient crops. To understand what life was like for humans at the time of the anomaly, let's examine the early Natufian culture of the Levant, which flourished at that exact time. This photograph shows the Hula Valley in northern Israel. In the ancient world, its dense reeds and marshy lake provided a fertile, resource-rich wetland ecosystem. Here, a society of nomadic hunter-gatherers simply stopped moving. They constructed a complex, permanent society thousands of years before the first agricultural seed was ever sown in the earth. If agriculture didn't force humanity to settle down, what drove them to build the world's first permanent villages? Transitioning from lightweight, temporary tents to a permanent village required massive physical labor. In this historical excavation photograph, we can see the heavy stone walls and deep structural foundations left behind. The builders cut these massive, semi-subterranean circular houses directly into the hillside. They utilized advanced construction techniques, assembling dry stone retaining walls and plastering their domestic floors with vibrant red ochre. Sustaining this architecture created a serious logistical problem. A concentrated population of nearly 100 people had to avoid starvation year-round without cultivating a single crop. The solution required the intense processing of wild resources. Archaeologists discovered heavy, non-portable basalt mortars embedded directly into the floors of the dwellings, designed to crush massive volumes of wild barley and acorns. They also manufactured sharp microlithic flint sickles. The stone edges of these tools bear a distinct polish known as sickle gloss, physical proof of the systematic heavy harvesting of wild grasses. Through a mastery of broad-spectrum foraging, the Natufians engineered a permanent civilization entirely out of the wild landscape, rendering agriculture completely unnecessary for settlement. Their technical sophistication extended into acoustics. In 2023, researchers made a startling discovery hidden among 1,100 discarded bird bones at the site: 7 tiny aerophones. This mallard duck represents the specific type of small waterfowl the Natufians targeted, carving the instruments directly from their hollow wing bones. To manufacture them, the builders used the sharp talons of birds of prey to drill precise, microscopic finger holes. The acoustic design is highly specific. The size and placement of the finger holes allowed for a tenfold variation in airflow, creating distinct high-pitched frequencies. When played, the flutes perfectly mimic the screeching calls of regional falcons. This Eurasian sparrowhawk was one of the exact acoustic targets the builders meticulously replicated. And here is the common kestrel in flight, the second raptor species these instruments were engineered to sound like. These chaotic sounds served a dual function. They acted as an acoustic lure to attract and trap wild birds of prey, and they also served as ceremonial music. These aerophones stand as the Levant's oldest known musical instruments, demonstrating that a deep mathematical grasp of acoustics existed 12,000 years ago. Beyond their daily survival and acoustics, the spiritual life of the village reveals exactly how the Natufians anchored themselves to this land. This diagram illustrates a striking spatial arrangement. The dead were buried in deep skeletal pits, dug directly beneath the floors of active living spaces. The Natufians literally lived on top of their ancestors, intentionally erasing the boundary between the living and the dead. Many of the deceased were buried with elaborate decorations, including headpieces carefully constructed from hundreds of tusk-shaped dentalium shells. By intertwining the resting places of the dead with the hearths of the living, the Natufians anchored their multi-generational claim to this new, sedentary territory. The most profound burial at Ain Malaha was discovered in the ruins of Dwelling 131. Her grave arrangement is remarkably specific. Her left hand was deliberately positioned so that it rested directly on the thorax of a 3 to 5 month-old canine puppy. Forensic analysis reveals the puppy survived a severe, debilitating viral illness resembling canine distemper. As this timeline indicates, the puppy was incapacitated by illness for almost its entire short lifespan, offering zero material benefit to the humans. To survive, it required intense manual intervention, being hand-fed and cleaned, proving it was kept alive strictly out of affection. Ultimately, this specific grave represents the earliest definitive archaeological proof of dog domestication, based entirely on emotional companionship. Ain Malaha reveals a community that had already mastered the foundations of permanent life: stone architecture, complex acoustics, and deep social bonds, thriving for millennia before the first mechanical invention of the farm. The data from 12,350 BC serves as a primary reference for calculating the scale of the threat now facing our modern infrastructure. This schematic shows how a modern satellite reacts to extreme radiation. A high flux of relativistic protons would penetrate the shielding and trigger deep dielectric charging, degrading optical sensors and blinding our orbital network. Down on the surface, the threat transitions from protons to geomagnetically induced currents, or GICs, pulsing through the high-latitude lithosphere. These induced currents don't strike from the sky, they travel up from the ground. The electrical load is pulled into the grounding wires of high-voltage transformers, saturating the equipment. The physical copper and steel inside those transformers would quickly overheat and melt, causing a cascading failure that rips through regional power grids. Our ancestors responded to the auroras by building new spiritual and social frameworks. A modern grid, by design, lacks that flexibility. It is built for a stable sun that the tree rings prove does not always exist. Early humanity survived the 12,350 BC storm because they could adapt their survival to the Earth. Today, our total reliance on interconnected electrical infrastructure has made us far more vulnerable to the exact same solar behavior.